Hey team, and welcome to another video in the Astrological Magical Elections video series. Today we are going to go ahead and talk about these magical electional opportunities that are coming up between this Aquarius Full Moon on August the 22nd until our Virgo New Moon on September 6th. So last time we had the Aquarius Full Moon, last month, we didn't really have any electional opportunities to talk about, and so I was kind of worried that we would have a similar situation just because the skies aren't really that much changed. Kind of like the biggest hindrances to our magical election crafting were the retrograde motions of Jupiter and Saturn, and those really haven't changed any. So I was worried that we wouldn't really have anything, but as luck would have it, we do actually have a few electional opportunities to talk about 4 different ones, and there's actually a lot of overlap between the 3 locations that I typically survey for what elections that they have available. There's not a lot of what we'll call like regional variance in regards to like different talismanic availability. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover each instance of what's available, and then I'll talk about what the chart looks like for those different locations and the timing for you all. So our first electional opportunity is actually going to be for a 4th Lunar Mansion talisman. And now the 4th Lunar Mansion is one that is a little bit more curse-oriented, and we lean into it really when we are trying to, it's specifically for pest control, basically, for like the removal of, the pediatrics refer specifically to like venomous animals, but obviously the implication is like pests. It's like, I think it actually says like lizards and snakes. But the kind of the general theme of pests is there. So it doesn't have to be just for like venomous animals or snakes and lizards. It can be for any kind of pest that you could possibly be fighting against. For the North American version of this chart, it is going to be on August 27th at 22:52, so just before 11 o'clock at night. And we're going to look for like 10 degrees of Taurus to be rising on the ascendant, as we can see here in our election for it. We have 10 degrees Taurus rising with the moon on the ascendant in the 4th Lunar Mansion. And the reason why we're kind of like specifically targeting this degree or a degree close to it is because we want to pull in this square of Saturn to the ascendant and the moon. Whenever we're working more with like the more destructive oriented talismans, which pest control definitely are, we want to pull in a lot of these more malefic configurations that we generally want to avoid. It's all about using the right tool for the right job, and usually malefic planets are not the right tools. We usually don't want them, we usually don't want to deal with them if at all possible. But when it comes to leaning into like the more destructive side of nature, then the malefic planets, that's really their forte. So at the same time, while the moon is separating from this square of Saturn and having to kind of deal with it, and the ascendant as well, she's applying this trine to Mars and Virgo. So we have like this double malefic connection with the moon. One, the Saturn square is a bit more harsh, obviously, than the Mars trine, which tends to be a little bit more easy. So this is not, usually you want this as like banged up as you could possibly have it. Like you want to rain hellfire down upon whatever pest it is that you are trying to counter or trying to work against or stop or get out of your vicinity. So usually the harder aspects are what are wanted here. So the trine aspect here to Mars is a bit easier and smoother than we might typically want it, since we're trying to create like a more hostile environment. But the connection to Mars itself as a malefic hostile planet is kind of more important than which of the aspects that connection is actually happening through. So the other location that this chart is going to be available for is actually also the Australian continent. The Western European and North Africa will not actually have an opportunity for this talisman. And for Australia, it's very similar. That time is August 28th at 23:02 is what this chart is set for, so like 2 minutes after 11 p.m. And the reason why it's set for that time specifically is to maintain this 8 degrees Taurus ascendant. You can see the moon is at 16 degrees Taurus. So if we were to have the moon more, permanently, maybe not permanently, more obviously angular with like 16 degrees Taurus rising or something, then we would kind of be falling out of orb between the ascendant and the Saturn square, which I would like to maintain as much as possible, because it's really that Saturn square that does the job, that makes it, in this case, a more applicable 4th Lunar Mansion talisman, because as you can see, the moon is 8 degrees separated from Saturn. So she's pretty far out of the way already, and applying really closely, now just 2 degrees away from this Mars in Virgo. So we were really trying to lean, this is almost like kind of a wimpy, in my opinion, pest control talisman in many ways. The only thing that's really kind of making it hard hitting, I guess, is that Saturn square. But even then, since the moon's not really there on top of it, and she's applying more of this harmonious aspect with Mars, it's, like I said, just kind of wimpy. There's not like a lot of force to it, which might be fine depending on kind of the level of force that you want to exert on the situation. So, kind of keep in mind for that as well. All right, so our second electional opportunity is actually going to be for a ninth Lunar Mansion talisman. And the ninth Lunar Mansion is another one of those kind of curse-oriented talismans. They're kind of all we really have to work with when we have waning moons, because we have to lean into more of the destructive or the passing away and decreasing motions that the moon embodies during this time. That's just kind of what nature dictates, and it's what we, as astromages, must follow. So the ninth Lunar Mansion, because the ninth Lunar Mansion is one that is primarily like associated with like cursing and afflicting, we're actually going to use it another different way. We are going to use it as a ward, as to ward and to banish is really where we're going to more focus it on, kind of the symbolism of the ninth Lunar Mansion is like a glaring lion's eye. It's like the lion's gaze. And so we're going to use that kind of like threatening stare, I guess, to ward away potential bad intentions toward us or our loved ones or our property or whatever, anything like that. So looking at our charts for this, for Australia, their version, and this is one that everybody gets, but in Australia, their version takes place on September 3rd at just after 4 in the morning at 4:02 is what this is set for. And here we've got the moon in the ninth Lunar Mansion on the ascendant, which is good. And at this time, she is applying a square to Venus in Libra in the third. And Venus in Libra is a very strong planet, like essentially. Being in the third house is a bit of a downer because the third is a cadent house and Venus does not have any sort of like joy there, we'll say. So that's not super great. But it's not a terrible connection to have It's not terrible to have this connection with Venus, since both the moon and Venus are strong in their signs of domicile. The square aspect is a bit unfortunate because it's kind of rough, but sometimes you got to be rough when you're warding and blocking and banishing things. So I don't think it's too terribly bad, but I definitely think that there would be better configurations for this, but I don't think this is bad. Taking a look at our North American version of this chart, it's pretty much the same as the Australian version. This one takes place on September 2nd at 2:30 in the morning, basically. This is at 2:31. And here we have kind of the same thing. The moon in the ninth Lunar Mansion rising on the ascendant. She's applying that square to Venus, who is now angular in the fourth house. That's kind of the big difference between the North American version and the Australian version, is Venus is now an angular, essentially dignified planet, which is much more capable of blocking and warding things. But we still have these two planets in their signs of domicile, now both in angular houses connected by this kind of difficult, we'll say, square aspect. But all in all, I like this chart a little bit better than the Australian version of the chart, just because Venus's angularity versus her cadency is a pretty clear-cut winner in this. Then our final version of this chart is Western Europe and North Africa's version of it, which I actually think is the best, probably. And this one takes place, this one that I have set for now, is September 2nd at 9:46 in the morning. You could push that back a little bit. As you can see, I've got the moon kind of far from the midheaven at this time, so you could probably push it like another 20 minutes and be fine. But I actually like this one the best, I think. So we've got the moon in the in the ninth Lunar Mansion. Conjoined the midheaven this time. She was on the ascendant in the previous ones. So that means now that the square to Venus is occurring with Venus as the ruler of the first house in the first house. And I like this one better because when it comes to these like blocking, shielding, warding kinds of talismans, I really prefer having some kind of benefic influence in the first house, whether that is a benefic planet being placed in the first house or a benefic planet aspecting the first house or something like that. It really makes it a lot smoother and safer and secure, especially if there are kind of like otherwise maybe not ideal configurations in the chart. So keep that in mind if you're looking forward for charts for this, or maybe you like the idea of a ninth Lunar Mansion for warding, protecting, whatever, but you're not super sold on this election. Just kind of like keep that in your mind that if you can find another situation that's similar, even if the moon maybe applies to a planet you don't super like, putting a benefic planet in the first house, or kind of changing the degree of the first house to be able to aspect a benefic planet somewhere else in the chart can really help strengthen that and make it more effective. So this moon in Cancer period is actually kind of busy. It will contain the rest of the elections. 3 out of 4 of our elections are going to be with the moon in Cancer, which is good. You know, the moon's good in Cancer. We like that. But it's really playing on this square to the dignified Venus in Libra. So this chart here is just that chart for the 9th Lunar Mansion talisman, set for Western Europe and North Africa still. But if you do this to it, it becomes a Venus talisman. Just advancing it by an hour, you have the ingredients for a Venus planetary talisman. So what we're looking for here is we want Venus in her domicile, check. We want Venus to be angular, check. We want the moon to be applying an aspect to Venus, check. And we want it to be Venus's day or hour. It is Venus's hour at this time at 10:46 a.m. And so everything that we need for a Venus talisman is there. The moon is slow. She's moving slowly in this chart, and of course we're getting kind of closer to the completion of the waning cycle. So those might be things that are a little less ideal, but it's kind of, this is going to be, I think this was the only Venus in Libra talisman that fit all of our criteria for this season, for this year. So, I mean, you know, do you want a Venus in Libra talisman, or do you not want one? Is kind of the question you have to ask yourself, because it'll be until next year that we have another one. And then, unfortunately, as we'll talk about a little bit more next video, the Moon-Venus conjunction close to Spica, which sounds really cool, is going to be interrupted by this stupid trine to Jupiter that I wished was gone. So the Australian version of this chart is a little bit more tenuous, I think, and because, so looking at our information here, their Venus talisman takes place on September 3rd at about 8 o'clock in the morning. And it's a Venus day. This happens on Friday after dawn, so they have kind of like the whole day to do whatever they want with it. But the reason why this chart is set, as you can see, like Venus isn't right on the ascendant like I usually have her, the moon's not right on the ascendant like I like to have it, is because, as you can see, this square between the moon and Venus is almost done. So you can see the moon is at 20 degrees and 37 minutes of Cancer, and she's applying to Venus, who's at 20 degrees and 48 minutes of Cancer. So, by the time the stars align, really, to get the talisman, to get everything that you need, the criteria that you need for the talisman done, the moon and Venus are almost done with their connection. The moon's about to move on. So I've got this chart set for 8:01 right now, but if I were to, let's take all this off and advance it, and just kind of see how far we can get before the moon. Yeah, about 8:26. So starting, that's when they separate. So starting around 8:01 gives you, half an hour basically to do whatever you want to do to make your talisman. You can start, you could do a talisman at this time at 8:20. You only have like 5 minutes left to finish the thing, which could potentially be possible depending on what you're doing. And you can have like the really angular Venus, the really tight connection between the moon, who's also angular and in her domicile. That could be really good too. But I just wanted to kind of show you the earlier one where they are less angular, as sort of like, here's your 30-minute period, do the thing, get it done. But if you have something that you can kind of prepare in advance and, just be done with, in just a few minutes, then you could wait until 8:20 or something to do it and really lean into the proximity of the planets to one another. And now North America has another continuous issue with their Venus and Libra talisman. So all the constituent parts are there. Venus is in her domicile. Venus is angular. Moon is applying the square to Venus, and it's Venus's hour at this point. So everything's there that you need. But Venus's hour starts at 10:16, and you can see that's what this chart is set for, September 2nd at 10:16. And you can see Venus is like right on the ascendant, already about half a degree over it. So you don't have that long to do what you need to do to get it done. So this one might be really hard for people in North America to get done, depending on what their preferred medium for talismanic construction is. Because you only have a small amount of time to do it before Venus falls into the 12th house and becomes cadent and unusable. So Western Europe and North Africa really got the easier mode with these elections because they have a lot more time to do what they need to do, whereas Australia and North America especially have much smaller time windows to get things done. So keep that in mind if you want to move forward with these. They are, I believe, the only Venus in Libra talismans that we're going to have. So, I mean, especially with the moon also in Cancer. So it might be worth trying your best to get them done. So our final electional opportunity that we're going to have for this 2-week period is that North America and Western Europe and North Africa are going to have an opportunity for a Procyon fixed star talisman. Unfortunately, Australia will not be able to pick up this opportunity. And of course, Western Europe, North Africa were not able to get the 4th Lunar Mansion talisman either, so I guess it all works out. But the Procyon fixed star talisman is an interesting one because it kind of has a lot of different applications that it can be used for. Agrippa talks about it being used specifically for like 3 kind of specific avenues. And one of them is the preservation of health, so there's definitely a medicinal and healing aspect of it. A bit more obviously preventative and strengthening one's health. So not super useful for individuals who are already sick, though it could potentially be useful for those who suffer from chronic pain. The other avenue is that it gives favor from people and spirits, so it can be very useful for individuals who work very closely with people in whatever capacity, or those who are trying to work more with spirits or kind of follow that path, that kind of spiritual application. And then the final application is that it is used to kind of give power over magic, is what Agrippa says. So it's kind of like an emergency, buff to your magic stat, I guess. And kind of my experience with that has been that it has helped to kind of like supercharge and facilitate connections with spirits a bit easier. But it's also a little bit weird to parse that out, since the other application is that it grants one favors from spirits. It's like, oh, where does one end, one begin? Hard to say. But the Procyon election for North America will take place on September 3rd, and I have this chart set for 3:33. Procyon rises at 26 degrees of Cancer, so I have that on the ascendant here with the moon applying to it, and at the same time the moon is applying this sextile to Mercury in Libra. Procyon is of the nature of Mercury and Mars, or Mars and Mercury, some combination of those 2 planets. So we definitely want to make sure that we have an aspect with either Mercury or Mars in a chart for a Procyon talisman. Mercury in this chart is cadent, which is not super important, I don't think, when it comes to fixed stars. We're not necessarily petitioning down the spirit of Mercury per se, but we're using that to help set the theme of time for Procyon, for the star that we are, for the spirit of the star that we're invoking. All we really need to make sure is that the ascendant and the ruler of the 1st house are not afflicted. So we've got this late Cancer rising. Moon is Moon is the ruler of the 1st house. She's not afflicted by Mars. She's not combust the sun. She's getting close. I'll say she's getting close to this opposition with Saturn. So, if that's something that you are more concerned about, maybe pass on this election. I think it's okay because we are, in different signs. We are still about 11 degrees apart from it, and the sextile with Mercury will, of course, happen before that. But definitely, if you're seeing the Saturn opposition there, I'm like, don't do it. So the Western European version of Procyon, they actually have options. So lucky. But the Western European version of the Procyon fixed star talisman features the moon, of course, up on the ascendant with Procyon rising. We're getting a little far from the ascendant here, which isn't that fun, but we're still there technically, so it counts. And at the same time, now we are applying this sextile very, very close with Mars in Virgo, so a little bit different than the North American version of it. Mars is one of the planets that is said to be of the nature, or Mars is one of the planets that Procyon is said to be of the nature of, so we want this connection to help facilitate the Procyon spirit as much as we can. The moon is not afflicted. The ascendant is not afflicted. We still have this kind of Saturn opposition, just like we did in the North American version, kind of far, kind of in the distance, we'll say. But if it's something that you are worried about, drawing in or taking or participating at all, avoid this if you would like, no problem. But Western Europe gets an option because they can either do this one with the moon on the ascendant, or they can do this one with the moon on the midheaven. And this one takes place at, at 10:52, so just before 11 a.m. And this one is a little bit different. It's changed a few things. We still have the moon with Procyon on the ascendant. I'm sorry, on the midheaven. I just said that. But now we're not applying the sextile with Mars anymore. Now we're applying the sextile with Mercury. Mercury's in the 12th house. I don't think super important, but if it's something that you don't like, totally understand. Now we've got the ruler of the first house is Venus, with Venus in the first house. So this would be, I would say, the trade between, if the Mercury in the 12th, the moon applying Mercury in the 12th makes you uncomfortable, then the dignified Venus on the ascendant. Here we have another instance of a benefic planet in the first house helping to kind of strengthen or stabilize the election. This should be a fine exchange or trade-off to have to deal with Mercury here. And I don't think it's that big of a deal at all, just because we're not specifically petitioning Mercury. But so that means that I would see Venus, this dignified benefic planet, in the first house as a bonus, not necessarily as an exchange. So if I had to choose between the two elections as which one was better, I think the one later in the morning at 11 is probably the superior chart, just because you get that Venus angular to help out with everything. But that doesn't mean that the other one earlier in the morning is bad at all. But alrighty, everybody, thank you guys so much for watching. That's all that I've got for you today. I think that if you had to pick which of the talismans to invest in, if you can only do one, I definitely think you should probably put more into that Venus in Libra talisman. It is the only one that we're going to get this year, and I know that Venus talismans tend to be pretty highly sought after. They do tend to, really, I think all planetary talismans tend to be kind of rare, but I know Venus is one that is a bit more popular. So definitely take this opportunity to get you one while the getting's good, because there's no telling what Venus in Pisces or Venus in Taurus are going to end up looking like, especially not Venus and Taurus, because we're still probably going to have to deal with the Saturn in Aquarius. Saturn in Aquarius, the square. So that's probably not going to do us any favors. So we're going to have to count on Venus in Pisces at some point. But all right, everybody, thank you so much, and I'll see you all again on the Virgo New Moon.